Thanks, Jeff. My mother would blush at that introduction. So, I am really pleased, really proud to be here. This is a really meaningful discussion for me, and I'm very happy that I'm competing with Goldman Sachs, I was told, for this audience today. So I'm really pleased to see as many people here as are. I'm a graduate of this school. I'm very proud to be a graduate of this school. I have numerous great memories of this place, and I know all of you are developing those memories now. I was driving down today I'm staying up at Westward Lookin', I was driving down Campbell, and as I drove by Campbell and Blackledge, I looked over and there's a Casa Molina restaurant. And it is one of the countless jobs that I held while I was here at this school, where I pulled rocks out of the Rio River. I worked at Scordado's and Smuggler's Inn in Casa Molina, the Bum Steer down on Stone, where I was a bartender. Best left unsaid about that one. But at Casa Molina, I was a waiter there, and I remember one night I was walking by, and let's face it, Tucson is still pretty country in a lot of ways, and a lot of the local residents here are ranchers and people, and we had a rancher who used to come in and eat at the restaurant all the time, and as I walked by, I looked over, and he's got his hand up to his mouth like this, and he's bleeding, and the waiter's standing next to him, and I go, what happened? And I don't know if you've ever seen in a lettuce crate, they have these tacks. They're huge. They're like this big, and they're that deep. And this guy had bitten into his chimichanga or whatever and got a tack through his upper lip. And he was there, and I was watching, and he pulls it out, looks at it, turns to the waiter, and he goes, what are you going to do now, reel me in? And I go, and then his wife went out to the car, got something, put it on him and stopped the bleeding. He finished his meal, got up and left, and that was the last we heard about it. Today he'd own the city of Tucson probably from the lawsuit. Today I'm going to talk to you about leadership and management and why I think they're not the same at all. We have a lot of managers running around this country and the world. We don't have a lot of leaders. And it shows in business, and if you don't believe me, just ask the former CEO of Volkswagen, who left unwillingly his post the other day because he created a culture where lying was okay. He created a culture in business where lying and cheating was okay. Now, whether he knew or not is irrelevant. As the leader, he had to go, and I supported that right off the bat. But before we get into a discussion about some of those things, I want to talk to you about two leaders that I know. This is Max and Kona. Max is on the top, he's a golden, and Kona's an Aussie. They were our dogs. There's another couple of players in this. Their son, they had a litter naturally, and their son Oscar was a player, and then there was a cat named Smokey. Kona was a natural leader. She was an alpha dog from the get-go. She was herding the rest of her litter around. She used to herd Max around. She would bark at him whenever he got out of line. Same with her pups, and chased the cat around and tried to eat it for 11 years. Sadly, Kona went to that big doghouse in the sky, and Max almost immediately changed his personality. He went from being a very subservient, very quiet, easygoing dog to being the big dog. And in fact, we started to refer to him as the big dog. And for the next 3 years, he was the one who did the pushing and shoving. He was the one who really ran the household and ran and I mean literally, in our case, he ran the household. And for 3 years, he was a tough guy. He was a leader. He went from being a follower to a leader. And I remember distinctly one day driving into the driveway, and I saw Max sleeping on the lawn, and next to him was Smokey the cat. And that would never have happened with Kona. So there was a big difference in the relationship and so on. And it didn't occur to me to be very important at the time, but as I look back on it now, it really was about that leadership, and it really struck me, maybe because it was so personal. You know, there's a lot of definitions of leadership. I put 3 up here. The only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. That is Peter Drucker, who is kind of the godfather of management gurus, and some of you, I'm sure, have studied him in the last couple of years, or will, I can assure you. The second one is leadership is the ability to translate vision into reality. vision into reality. That's Warren Bennis who wrote that definition. He's a professor was a professor at University of Southern California and kind of the expert on leadership as people know it. The third definition is by a guy named Kevin Kruse. You can read about him. You can read him in Forbes. His definition is leadership is a process of social influence, maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. I really like that definition because unlike Bennis's, which is translating vision, or Drucker's, which is do you have followers, that covered a lot. This covers a lot of ground. It's got people, it's got social influence, it's got the maximization of a goal. And those are things that are important in business and important to me. Managers have subordinates. Managers have subordinates. Leaders have followers. So when we talk about leaders having followers, that's what we mean. And you can see, I threw in a cartoon there. If it was only this easy. When I grow up, I want to be a leader, or you want to follow me. There's a lot of theory on leadership, and I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about that, even though it's kind of dry and it's somewhat academic. It's important to understand that the study of leadership goes back hundreds of years. And back in the early 19th century, there was something called the great man theory. And the great man theory was just that, great men. Women didn't qualify. And it really grew out of the aristocracy of those years, and it basically said that there were leaders, they were endowed by God with certain features and qualities and traits that made them incredibly effective as leaders. And that's how you end up with a George Washington, because he was out of the aristocracy, clearly was a leader, 6'4", not too many people know that. He could command tremendous respect. He was the father of our country, set the tone for how presidents acted for the next 250 years. A very great man, but I don't necessarily buy into that theory. As time went by, that theory sort of morphed into what's called the traits theory. And the traits theory says that you're given traits. You have these qualities that are natural and normal for leaders. And they include things like ambition, aggressiveness, the ability to move people towards something. Those traits exist in people. Leaders are born, not made. That's the theory there. That morphed later into various behavioral theories and those are the counterpoint. Those theories are counterpoint to traits theory, because what they say is the exact opposite. Leaders are made, not born, that you can acquire or learn or develop the qualities that you need in order to be an exceptional leader. I buy into that somewhat. To a certain degree, I believe in that. The contingency theory is one that says something even more complex. It says that there's a bunch of factors that come together, situations, the personality of the individual, the people involved who are going to be with this individual as followers of this leader, and that all that creates a kind of nexus of leadership, and those contingent situations, the various situations that you face along the way, make the difference. Maybe. There's certain styles that are associated with leadership too. Situational leadership was developed by a guy by the name of Ken Blanchard. Some of you may have heard of him. He wrote The 1 Minute Manager, another management guru. Pretty powerful guy, good speaker, gets $50,000 to give a speech, develops this thing called situational leadership, where it's really about what type of direction do you give people based on two things, the level of their competence and the level of their commitment. Has anyone studied this or heard about this before? It's a pretty common thing. And the classic example is you're talking to John sitting in the chair next to you, and if John has no competence and he has no or very low commitment, you say, John, please stand up, get out of your chair, walk over to that pencil, pick it up, go to the drawer, open the drawer, put it in the drawer, come back and sit down in this chair. Highly directive. Right? You're telling them exactly what you want done. Now, Sally, on the other hand, may be highly committed, and she may have a very high degree of commitment. She knows what she's doing, and she knows a whole lot about pencils. So you might say to Sally, hey, Sally, check out that pencil over there. We probably ought to do something about it. And that's it. You're highly supportive of her. She goes and takes care of it. She does it. And it's a very, very small level of direction. So it's situational, depending on what level of commitment and competence the people have. Transactional leadership is when it's exactly what it says. I'm the supplier of labor, you're the buyer, I supply it to you, you pay me, I do exactly what you say. Anybody know of an example of that? Really common example of that. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's the big example, of course, is the military. You enlist in the Army, potatoes need peeling, the sergeant comes to you and says, go peel those potatoes, get back to me when it's done. Very transactional, it's a transaction. Transformational leadership is very different then. Transformational is what we all kind of think about when we think of leadership and the romance of it and the charisma of it, right? The transformational leader is somebody who has a vision and he's able to communicate, or she is able to communicate that vision. And they're able to motivate people to follow them. If you think back to Cruz's definition, where you're going to influence behavior based on a vision that you might have with a goal in mind. Transformational leaders are, in my mind, some of the best leaders. And if you think about the two classic examples of transformational leaders in the 20th century, you would think in two presidents, you would think of Franklin Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan. Both of them had a vision of what they wanted to do. Both of them wanted to deal with tremendous economic malaise. One a depression, the other one almost a depression. One defeated fascism, the other one defeated communism. Very transformational leaders have vision and they're able to develop a team around them. If you think about what Roosevelt's team was called, the brain trust, right? And Reagan's team were top-notch people in industry and government. They were able to achieve a tremendous amount of things. Transformational leadership. But when you think about the pop culture and you think about what makes somebody a particularly strong leader, you oftentimes think of Star Trek, and I'll explain why. When I was at Paramount Pictures taking Forrest Gump and licensing it to the name Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, they had one other property that was just a home run, millions and millions of dollars of income, and that was Star Trek. So it's very deep in the pop culture, and I thought it might be appropriate to talk about some of what makes it such an unusual.
I don't believe in a no-win scenario. You are looking at the only Starfleet cadet who ever beat the no-win scenario.
I don't believe in no-win scenarios.
This is the Kobayashi Maru. 19 periods out of all tier 6. We have struck a gravitic mine and have lost all power. Our hull is penetrated and we lose the
The Kobayashi Maru scenario frequently wreaks havoc with students and equipment. As I recall, you took the test 3 times yourself. Your final solution was, shall we say,
It's the Kobayashi Maru. No one passes the test, and no one goes back for seconds, let alone thirds.
The Kobayashi Marus. Will you tell me what you did?
I reprogrammed the simulation so it's possible to rescue the ship.
So, we've managed to eliminate all enemy ships. No one on board was injured, and the successful rescue of the Kobayashi Maru crew is underway.
I don't like to lose.
Sorry, I have a Mac. I can tell you. Everything's different on PowerPoint with a Mac. What makes Captain Kirk topical for this discussion, and something that I wanted to talk about, is that Kirk is what a literature professor would call a Superman, right? Whether it's played by Chris Pine or William Shatner, he never loses. He always wins. He solves every problem. He wins every situation. He's a Superman. But Kirk's leadership style is what I would call very entrepreneurial, because he's sometimes transactional, very often transformational. He's clearly situational, because he treats Dr. McCoy very differently than he treats Scotty or Sulu or Chekhov, right? He develops a lot of different management styles that he uses when he's dealing with those people. At Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, and what you're seeing here is the Monterey Bubba Gump. That was our original restaurant, opened when we convinced Paramount Pictures it was a good idea to do this. We really didn't know. We really didn't know if it would work. Market research later bore out that there was an unforced translation from the movie to a restaurant. It made sense that a restaurant would exist. And I can't tell you how many times I had customers come up to me and say, well, I knew you had the shrimp company, but I never knew you had the restaurant. Like, no, not really, but we did. We opened it thinking it would do $3 million its first year. It ended up doing $6 million. It was wildly successful. We went on to prove the concept out in a number of locations around the world: Hong Kong, London, Tokyo, New York, and Times Square, and so on. And we were very fortunate. Why were we fortunate? I had a superb team of people, really good people, and they were very motivated and very hard workers. My management style with them was very supportive, not very directive. I'm a pretty participative, collaborative manager. I like to get a lot of ideas from people, and I like to bring it all into a group where we can talk about it kind of ad nauseum, and some people don't do well in that situation. But once we decide on a course, then that's our course. And we stay on it, and we follow the strategy or the direction using the tactics that we've described or that we've come up with. I think that we went on as time went by at Bubba Gump, and we were able to create something that was kind of unique. Not unique as a restaurant per se, really more unique as a management culture. Really more unique as a culture generally, where people felt empowered to do what they wanted to do. And I really was devoted to that idea. I wanted people to feel empowered. So my style was pretty entrepreneurial as well. Pretty much focused on making this thing a success, not just for me or for my shareholders, but also for the team that built it. And that team was pretty big, really big. If there was a way of doing it, I just put a few tenets on here. I would always say this: don't hire the best necessarily. Hire the best who can work together, work as a team. It's a big distinction. And I really, if there were people who wanted to fight turf wars or wanted to be, this is my department, stay out of my dish, as they say, then we'd run them out. Because that's not the kind of group that I wanted. I wanted people who work together as President Reagan said, it's amazing how much you can get accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit. Hard culture to develop, but if you can develop it, then you've got some really powerful people. You can be, as I talked about, be of many minds, but ultimately of only one voice. Once you decide on a course, you stay it, and you take it, and people get on board and move in that direction. And you can have as much discussion ahead of that as you want, but in the end, you're on the way. Open your book to all. I'm a very open book manager. Everybody know what open book management means? It means a lot of people get to see the P&L. A lot of people get to see the balance sheet. They get to see the strategic plan. They don't get to see it. They have to learn it. They got to know it. Because that's how you get everybody pulling on the oar in the same direction. Because if you can get them to buy into it, if you can get them to believe in it, then they're going to be people who want you to succeed and want to succeed themselves. And the last thing is, and this was not added in the last 2 days, don't lie, ever. Don't ever lie. There's a quote up here that I saw as I walked in. It says, make absolute integrity the compass that guides you in everything you do. I've never met Carl Eller, although he lives about 2 miles from me. But I can tell you that quote is something that could have been on the wall at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company too. We believed in integrity, and if you couldn't live up to that, you really didn't belong, and you really felt it right away and you wanted to get out of it. Don't lie ever. And it's not as easy as it sounds. What I've learned over the years is this: everybody has the capacity to be a leader. Everyone in this room, and this is no pep talk. I don't give pep talks. Everyone in this room has the capability to be a leader. It's a matter of learning the skills and doing the things that you need to do, learning the knowledge, learning the ability to influence people, and having a vision that you can get people to buy into. It's not as hard as it sounds if you're passionate about what you do, if you believe in what you're doing. What I really love about Arizona's approach and Eller particularly, is their approach, is it's very entrepreneurial. And this is one of the nationally ranked universities in entrepreneurism. And there's a good reason for that. And I believe in that. I believe the best in business come as entrepreneurs. I'm not a custodial manager. You know what I mean by a custodial manager? I'm not somebody who's going to take over an existing company and then just administrate it and kind of run it. That's not in my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is in taking a bankrupt company like Rusty Pelican and turning that around and then setting about looking for a growth vehicle like Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, and then taking that into a growth situation and building it up. That's what sets me on fire. That's what really gets me going. But as I developed people within my organization, what I learned is all of them became leaders on their own, and they all had groups of people that were following them. And that's okay. In fact, it's good. It's the right thing. So everyone has the capability to be a leader. One style alone doesn't work. You have to be transactional as the CEO of a company. There are times along the way where you're going to say, take that item off the menu, take that item out of production off the assembly line, fire that person. Here's my business card. Let me see yours. Okay, you going to fire them or not? That's the kind of thing, that's going to happen. It has to happen. That's what business is about. That's tough decisions. You have to be transformational. You have to develop a vision and inspire people to follow you. You have to get them on board and get them to believe in it. And I hope I did that. I pretty strongly believe I did. And hopefully I'll do it again some other time. But everybody in here can do it if they're following something they're passionate about. Sometimes your winning formula leadership style isn't going to work. I could not run Chili's. I can't run it. It's not because they're a bad company. They're good. Brinker is a really good company. But the division called Chili's is all about maintaining that particular brand, not building it too fast, building a couple of 10, 12 restaurants a year. They've got 700. And just keep it on an even keel. That's not Scott Barnett. And I don't think that's what an entrepreneurial style manager does. I don't think they want to do that. They shouldn't. So your winning formula leadership is not appropriate. I'm not an appropriate leader for that division of Brinker. Now, if it's somebody who's in trouble, or if they're starting something up, yeah, sign me up. And then the final thing I'd say on this is that your leadership style has to reflect who you are. Don't fake it. Don't try to have the leadership style that Lee Iacocca had at Chrysler, or that Steve Jobs had at Apple, or that any of the great CEOs have. Be yourself and make the leadership style you have conform to who you are. There's so many people are tempted to try to be something they're not, and playing outside yourself is the sports analogy. Play within yourself. And if you do, then you have the capability of being the leader you want to be. Now, I used to ask myself a lot of questions, and I had a lot of, obviously, self-doubt along the way and all those things. And you will too, in whatever it is you do. So ask yourselves those kinds of questions. Am I being myself? Am I being an appropriate leader? Do I have the integrity? All those things that I've talked about. That's the best advice I can give you. That's the best advice. And if all else fails, ask yourself, what would Max do? That's what I do. I was in high school. I graduated from high school, and I was working in a gas station in Palm Desert, California, saving up money. My parents couldn't really help me out on school, so I was saving up money to go to school, and I ended up borrowing a friend's motorcycle and put it down in a gravel road and broke my ankle, so I had to put off school. And when I came back to work, I couldn't work at the gas station anymore, so I got a job as a valet parking attendant at a restaurant. And one night a hostess came out and said, "You're going to wait tables tonight." Or no, you're going to bus tables tonight. So I did, and I went in and I kind of caught the bug. And after that, I worked here in this town in numerous restaurants as a cook, bartender, whatever. Got involved with a company called Rusty Pelican. I knew the guy who owned it. His name was Pete Siracusa. He was a surfer. I was a surfer. And he talked me into being a manager, and 7 years later, I was running it. And that's how it happened. Yeah. Recruiting's a 50-50 game, okay? You can get good ones, you can get bad ones. The only way you're going to know is by doing it. You can get a feel for it because, I mean, I had a very diverse group, and I also had most of my senior management were women, which is, it's unusual in the restaurant business all the time. It was really unusual 10 years ago. And what mattered to me was, could you work together? And if they couldn't work together, it became very evident very quick, then they had to go. So that I got very transactional in that one. Yes? Within large groups? A couple of things. And that's a really good question, by the way, because I had 5,000 employees. First of all, I'm a huge believer in repetition. Huge. I can't tell you how. We had 5 goals we set every year. Every meeting, every group meeting, every time I went to a restaurant, I talked about those goals. And I repeated them over and over again. I can tell you what they are right now for the last year I ran the company. Increasing same-store sales, always the number one goal at Bubba Gump in terms of its strategy. I would say that's one. 2, we had employee roundtables where I went around, where I or 2 other senior people within the company went around and held meetings with the people in those restaurants, employees, without managers present. And we would talk about what the goals were, but we also got feedback from them about what was good, what was bad, and what they thought could be done to make the process or the restaurants better. So we listened. And if you don't become a listener in that, and if you don't believe that some of your lowest level people can come up with the best ideas, you're crazy. They can. They really can. Yes? The Hoggins example you used, I know it really well because there's a Hoggins actually, an Albertsons that's now a Hoggins about a mile from my house, and it's closing. And what happened, just for those who don't know, Hoggins is, I believe, a Seattle-based grocery chain that decided they were going to expand very rapidly. They bought hundreds of stores, not just Albertsons, by the way, but others. They bit off way more than they can chew. They didn't have the capability, the infrastructure, either financial or operational, to be able to take on all that, and they're now in 11. I think if you don't have the team of people, and you don't have the financial backing, and you don't have the organizational infrastructure, if you will, then it's a fool's errand to try to expand at that level. And anyone who tries to go, I mean, the road is littered with companies, both in the restaurant industry and in every other industry, with people who tried to double, triple in size in a year or 2. You have to remember what I said earlier about playing within yourself. Another example is Northwest Airlines. Back years ago, Northwest Airlines had this supposedly great management team, and they were going to acquire a much larger airline in, I believe it was Delta. And so this great management team was going to do it. Well, they turned out to be not so great. And Delta went in, as they all do, all the airlines do, they went into bankruptcy. But the other examples are, there's countless ones of companies that have grown successfully and quickly because they hit right on the business cycle curve, or they had the right team and they had the right financial backing and all the rest. Chili's, the example I used, was really about, for me, the kind of growth pattern that they had. It's not for me. I can't triple a company in size in 1 year unless I have a super team. Not just a good team, a super team. And I can't do it alone. It's got to be a whole group effort. Increasing same-store sales, making budgeted profit, building a bench, which means getting enough people that you can expand and have the team to grow on the basis of your growth pattern. Reduce costs of construction for new restaurants, because our restaurants were costing $4.5 million a piece, and we need to get that down to $3.5 million. Create an environment where people can become champions. Those were the 5 goals. That's sort of like the great man theory. I'm kind of not a believer in that. I think that you plan, you make the plan and you work the plan. And if you follow your plan and you're doing it intelligently, then you're not going to reach those points where it's a make or break. But I mean, I guess there's always the situation where, I used to say that the thing that kept me awake most at night was that my entire economic future was in the hands of a dishwasher in Miami if he didn't wash his hands after using the restroom. It's a true story. You give hepatitis to 50 people with a name like Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, it's national news, even though we're not that big of a company. We were only 250 million. But if Bubba Gump gives hepatitis to 50 people, forget it. You're done. Stick a fork in it. It's that kind of thing, yeah, I agree, that can happen. No. In the sense that if they're low competence and low commitment, they need a more directive support, and I believe in that. If they're very competent and they're very committed, then no, I'm very supportive on that. So I wouldn't, you change your management style based on what those levels are, and also you're trying to stay consistent with the vision that you've established and that you're trying to articulate to them on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. That's how you stay with it. I don't know if I'm answering your question as well as you would like, but here's another one. Sally and John. Sally might be very committed and highly competent when it comes to pencils. But when it comes to changing out the toner in the copy machine, she doesn't know anything. So you need to be highly directive with her on that. So she's getting directive behavior and she's getting highly supportive. John may not know anything about pencils, but he may be a darn good busboy. So he doesn't need to be told how to clean a table. So it varies not just on the person, but on the task. How good are they at what they do? And I guess the answer to your question is that you have to be an artist in that regard. You have to figure out along the way what's best, and you're going to make mistakes all the time. And your leadership success will be dependent on how you make them feel about what they're doing. And they have to feel like they're winning, and they have to feel like they're part of something important. And it doesn't matter whether it's all three of the people who are fill in the blank, bagging groceries, or it's the three top people at Apple. They have to feel like they're doing something important and they feel good about it. Yeah, next question. Yes. Depends on the job. Yeah. If I'm hiring a vice president of operations, then I want somebody who is relentlessly on top of operations management, systems, systemized approaches, understands service at the same time, and understand there's a science and an art to operations in the restaurant business, and you got to be able to do both. If you're hiring a food server at Bubba Gump, we hired for attitude and trained for technique. We didn't care if you had experience, and a lot of places won't hire inexperienced food servers. We actually liked that because we could train you in the way we wanted you. What we were looking for was an entertaining personality who could make a friend for 45 minutes, as a server put it to me one time at a round table. And I didn't care. We had a guy in Maui, we used to call him Sweaty Boy. And Sweaty Boy was just that. He used to perspire a lot. But the guy was the most entertaining server you could possibly want. And the guy didn't follow any of the rules, not that we had many anyway, because for servers and you can't really have a lot of rules. But Sweaty Boy had people coming back for 6 months later. They'd come back to Maui, and they wanted him as their waiter, only him. And that's what we wanted. We wanted personalities, to hire for attitude and train for technique. So it depended on the job and what you were looking for, really. We were lucky. We hit on what Norman Brinker, who's a very famous old restaurant guy, passed away a few years ago. He used to have an expression. He'd say, for you to be successful as a restaurant, you've got to really hit right on the lifestyle curve. Now, what's the lifestyle curve, Well, it's a combination of population demographics, income, what's hot, what's not. I mean, who hits on the who used to hit on the lifestyle curve every single time he introduced a product? Anyone? Steve Jobs. Exactly. He knew exactly where he was on the lifestyle curve. So would I rebrand Bubba Gump? No. Would he rebranded Apple? No, I don't think he. I mean, he did, but he did when he came back to fix it. And Bubba Gump's not broken. It's still not broken. 5 years later, it's doing okay. It's not an either or. It's both. You cannot. It's not an either or. And I'm really glad you asked that question, because I used to say this to people all the time. You know, is the customer always right? No. Do we want them to make them think they're always right? Yes. You know, I mean, they're not. I mean, some of these people are really crummy people, right? And they're there to get a free meal, let's face it. But you can't treat them like that. You can't treat anyone like that. So you want to have people and employees and a team of people in a restaurant and in an office or in a warehouse or in a factory where they can create an atmosphere, in Bubba Gump's case, of fun and excitement. But you can create an atmosphere that fits with the strategic goal and the style of the company. So we wanted people who could create an atmosphere of fun and excitement. I used to say, I don't want managers to run these restaurants, I want leaders running them. The person who runs the New York Bubba Gump is running a $24.5 million business. One restaurant, $24.5 million last year. She has an assistant general manager, 5 floor managers, a chef, 2 sous chefs, a retail manager, an assistant retail manager, 2 sales managers, and a safety manager. She has 13 direct reports. She's exceptionally competent and a really good leader. Good manager, excellent leader. So create an atmosphere of fun and excitement. Are the employees more important? No. Are the customers more important? No. They're both important. If they're having a good time, the customer will too. Yeah. Was the restaurant business a risky business? There is no, the commonly held belief is that 90% of all restaurants fail in their first year. It's crap. It's not true. The real number is about 65% of restaurants fail within 3 years. Just so you know, 65% of dry cleaners fail in the first 3 years. 65% of used car dealers fail in the first. Everybody fails. It's not the failure rate in restaurants is not that high. What's the problem in restaurants is the profit margin for the not so good performers is like that. It's nothing. So you can still stay in business, and a lot of you can go into any city in America and see a lot of these mom and pop one-off stores that are probably skimming a third of the business in order to not pay taxes and be able to stay in business. But it's very few that break through and make the kinds of profits that you would all like to make, and that's going to excite private equity or venture capital and that type of thing. Very risky in that regard. Well, we had annual goals, which we set by my management team and I getting together in strategic planning every year and came up with the following year's goals. And that was done during the budget process. So if we were starting the budget process in September, we'd work all the way through December till we got a final budget, submit it to the board, and we get it approved. At the same time, we would also do our goal setting. Now, we also had quarterly goals, which we set, and those were set from operations down through the restaurants. So it was a bottom up and top down. Absolutely. I mean, it is, I've used this expression already once today, it's a fool's errand to try to create goals from the top down only. You're an idiot if you do that. Let me put it bluntly. You're a screaming idiot if you try to do it that way. Because if you don't have buy-in from the bottom up, you're going to fail. It's an axiom. It really is the case. In today's world, where everything is so specialized and And when I went to school at University of Arizona, you just applied, you were accepted, you said you declared your major, you went into that school, that was that. In today's world, you've got to get into this school, right? And you got to stay in. And you've got to get a certain GPA, and you got to be more specialized. You've got to be more, and it would be very helpful, I think, if you were working in a business that is something that is going to be applicable down the line. Now, it just so happens, I end up in the restaurant business, and I worked in restaurants. That works out great, right? But I mean, if you're working in a bunch of restaurants and you're going to end up in systems technology, probably a good idea to try to look for a company. Not that you're going to find many, sadly, in Tucson, but and by the way, I want to add something on that. I was stunned over the last couple of times, and Jeff, I've talked about this with you, about how little has changed here over the last 30 years since I went to school here. And it's really amazing because there were a lot of people in my generation who wanted to stay. They wanted to be in Tucson. They like it. It's not a bad place to live. It's beautiful. The weather's great. There's a lot to do. You've got the mountains. You've got Mexico down the way. I mean, there's a lot to do. But there aren't a lot of opportunities here. And I think that's really unfortunate. And I mean, I won't get started on politicians, but it's people's jobs in politics to make opportunities for everybody. And there should be a lot more opportunities for people at the U in every field, but particularly in business, because I mean, I'm really kind of disappointed at what I've been seeing the last few visits here. It's like there's two cities here. If you live north of Rio River, that's one city. If you live south of Rio River, that's another. And it's and except for the U, and there's pockets like El Encanto and that kind of thing. But I mean, I'm surprised that Phoenix has gone off like a rocket. It's a mini LA. Lots of opportunities, lots of growth, lots of chances for people. And here it's just kind of still the same, just kind of toddles along. This university ever closed down, my God, you just closed down the city. And it's really astounding. We did not have a mission statement. She asked me, the question was, when you were creating your mission statement, what are the key things? It's fun, that's another one I'm glad you asked, because I didn't believe in that we should have a mission statement. I wanted it to be organic and part of the culture. I wanted the culture to be ever-changing, ever-growing, ever-different. Look, I'm a rule breaker. I really am. I mean, if it's not evident by now, it never will be. I break rules sometimes just because I like it. So it's not like I'm your typical textbook kind of CEO in a lot of ways. And Jeff, and by the way, let me just say one thing about Jeff Schatzberg. He and his predecessor were very helpful in making this book. If you like anything you read in this book, you can thank these guys because they made it really much better than it could have been. But he knows. I mean, I'm a rule breaker, right? And I'll do things differently just because I want to. And that kind of thing about a mission statement, it's appropriate for a lot of companies. It's the right thing, and I believe in that. But for a company that I'm involved with, probably best that we let that grow over time and become easily recognized. Hard to describe. Well, the question is, if someone's not doing their part, how do you get them to start? And my answer to that would be, if you're a good leader, you're going to motivate people. You give people every opportunity, every tool, every opportunity to try to make them better and make them be better than they think they can be. If at some point you just can't get there, then it's probably time to part ways. And that's when you get transactional. Yeah. Every day I write a to-do list. Every day. Not on Sunday, but actually I write one Sunday night for the whole week. But I write a to-do list when I get up. I work out a lot. I like to stay in good physical shape, and I think that's important for leaders, that you stay physically sound and in good shape. I spend about 15, this is going to sound kind of odd, but I spend about 15 to 20 minutes a day. I live on the water in San Diego, and I go down to the beach, and I sit on the beach, and I'll meditate and do deep breathing, yoga breathing, for about 15 or 20 minutes. That's very good. That really clears me and helps me think things through in a more clear fashion. Yeah, those are some habits. Well, if you're doing your job, then you've come up with a strategic plan that is sound. So you likely, hopefully, don't have to change it. The answer to when you change it is as soon as you know. As soon as you know it's going the wrong way. And you move decisively to do it. And I can give you a mundane example of it. I had people, we used to serve strawberry lemonade at Bubba Gump. Sounds kind of like okay, yes, so does everybody else. Well, ours was made with fresh lemon juice, and we made fresh lemonade. We used real strawberries, and I really liked the product, and we ended up selling it for like $3.95, and we didn't give free refills. And over time, everybody on my team was telling me, we got to start giving free refills. We got to start giving free refills. And I would resist, and finally they cornered me down in Florida one time and said, we're getting all these comment cards, we've got to do it. I'd go, okay, fine, let's give them the free refills. So we do, and then I had the director of finance run a spreadsheet on it. Turned out that single one decision cost the company $400,000 in a year. One little decision like that. Seemingly small decision. And we had to go back, change the recipe, go to lemonade off the gun instead of the fresh lemonade. We had to use, strawberry syrup instead of fresh strawberries. Then we had to charge $1 for a refill. It was a disaster. So, seemingly small decisions, when you see them going wrong, fix it right away. On a much larger scale, we started a concept called Rusty's American Cafe. Anybody ever heard of it? Probably not, because it was a complete failure, right? We went out and we were trying to do Rusty Pelican Light. Rusty Pelican was a seafood dinner house, very upscale, today it would be about a $45 average check. And we tried to do a small, easy, fast, cheaper version of it. Customer didn't get it, didn't understand it. We don't think we understood it. It was bad, it was a failure. Cut it off right at the knees. As soon as you know, got to go. Yes, sir?
I just want to ask one question. So what's next for Scott Barnett?
Well, right now, I just finished this gig as a interim CEO, and that came out of a consulting arrangement. I'm currently consulting with a company called Lowry's, the prime rib and seasonings company, and I just signed that deal, so I'm doing that. I don't think there's another book for a long while. And then, of course, I'm doing this and talking and all that. But I'm not sure yet. I've never had this mission statement question you asked was kind of indicative of my personality. I've never really had a long-range plan for myself. It's just, as things come along, grab at what you can that you think is good for you and good for others and where you can make a difference. So I don't know yet. We'll see. Listen, I'm sorry that this went on for an hour, and I don't know if it was supposed to, but I really enjoyed it. I can't tell you, whatever you get out of this, I got more, trust me. And I'll give you with one last piece of advice I'll tell you about my son. My son is a really smart guy, very smart. He got 1550 on his SATs, 4.6 GPA, but he used to be painfully shy. And he went to school back east, and he was getting his normal good grades, but he wasn't getting his great grades, and it was because of his class participation and all the rest of it. And he called me up one day very upset, and he was saying, I don't know what I have to do, I don't know what I can do, they're just not, I'm not able to make this work, in a public setting. And I said to him, you know what, why don't you next semester take an acting class? This is a guy who's economics major. He's very smart, works at a hedge fund now. And he said, an acting class? And I'm like, yeah, why don't you take an acting class? So he did, and then he took another. And last year, I was at his, he was announcing his engagement. He's getting married. He got married this summer. And we were walking back to the hotel. He was dropping me off in Boston. And he turned to me and he said, you know that advice you gave me about taking an acting class? And I said, yeah. And he goes, that was the best advice you gave me all through college. And the reason I bring this up is that being adept at social media does not make you socially adept. And this world today is not, there aren't many new things. Word of mouth advertising was what it was 50, 100 years ago. Today, it's Yelp or it's OpenTable in my business. It's still word of mouth. Whether or not it came out of your mouth or not, it's still a personal recommendation by somebody. So it's not new. But what is new is the social interaction between people. Think back to Cruz's definition. So it's a socially influenced people. That really counts. If you can articulate a vision and you can talk to people back and forth and you know how to present and you know how to, like what I'm doing right now, if you can do that, you're light years ahead of others. Take an acting class. Thanks, everybody.